Hi there, guys. So, just wanted to pick up today on a story about the increasing costs of childcare in the summer holidays. So, I wanted to talk about this today because my overall feeling is that the politicians and the media, they seem to sort of view the cost of living crisis as being over. But this is something that's really relevant to me currently because I've got an 18-month-old baby at home and I'm really struggling with the childcare fees at the moment. And it's just interesting to note that this impacts children of all ages, because I was really hoping for a bit of respite when he goes to school, to be honest. But in terms of our economy, as I mentioned, the cost of living crisis is certainly not talked about half as much as immediately after the COVID supply chain spikes. The increased costs within the system, they didn't go away. They are now a permanent feature of our economy. And because inflation is still running hot, that exacerbates the price rises that we've already seen. So, everyone's going to be familiar, aren't they, with the issues, weekly shopping, utility bills, water, council tax, all of the other bills that we have to pay have remained elevated. They certainly haven't come down where I live. Childcare in particular, it's a huge cost for any family, as I touched on. And that, again, continues to go up routinely. So there was a week earlier this year when I got an email from the people at work saying that we wouldn't be getting a pay rise this year because of the government's NI increase. And then in the same week, I got another email from my kids' nursery saying that they were increasing the nursery fees for the very same reason. So we've had that process of both businesses and organisations sort of cutting staff costs whilst also raising prices. So again, that disproportionately impacts ordinary people and just contributes to this ongoing cost of living crisis. Moving on from that, we have also what I'm going to call sort of long austerity, really. So in the article on the BBC there, they talk about the closure or cutting back of council services for summer holiday clubs. And, so previously those council services, they would have been subsidised and now they're not there. So obviously that's been a massive feature of our society, since 2010, the hacking back of council services and local government support for families. And then there's also just the practical element of working around school holidays and how that negatively impacts working parents. So if you think about it, there's 12 weeks of school holidays in any year. So if you've got two parents who both work full time, each one of those people are going to have 5 weeks of annual leave. So that leaves 2 weeks in the year where there's no childcare or where a parent's going to need to fund holiday clubs, and that's going to be for entire days, so very expensive. So obviously, as a parent of a child, you go through different phases, don't you? So at the moment, I'm at the stage where I'm paying for nursery fees. But when my kid's old enough to graduate from nursery to school, I'm going to be graduating from nursery fees, which are easily running into the thousands of pounds, to what we're talking about here, again, exorbitant costs for clubs in the summer holidays. So now maybe the cost will be slightly less than nursery fees, but now you've got both the cost and the time element, which again negatively impacts working parents. I know there's going to be people out there who will say, well, if you can't afford to have kids, then don't. But I think it's very important to have this debate because the situation has worsened so much just within my lifetime. And if things don't change, it's going to get worse still. So again, a personal story. My parents are just normal people who had normal jobs when I was growing up. And when I was born, my mum was able to take time off to care for me. And then later she did the same for both my siblings. So on a single normal wage, my parents were able to pay their mortgage and bills, run a car, and just have a modest holiday once a year. And I think sadly that's sort of impossible now. There's no way with the size of the mortgage that I've got, for example, that we could survive on one income. It's just impossible. And then obviously I just wanted to talk about what this all means for our country in the long run. For me, it's just ludicrous that we've created a system that is just so ridiculous. And then you see people like sort of Miriam Cates, Danny Kruger, these nutty Christian Tories, banging on about how it's our duty to have more kids, how we need to do our bit for the country, etc. For the reasons I've sort of set out, it's absolutely impossible. I couldn't even imagine having another kid. Just the costs of one are just crippling, and so having two would be absolutely ridiculous. And what does that all mean for this country? Well, it means more immigration, doesn't it? And that in turn means more political scaremongering and division. This is just one small part of the cost of living crisis, but it's really important for the reasons that I've just mentioned. And it just again highlights that we really need sort of practical and meaningful solutions to this cost of living crisis, and urgently. And sadly, I don't see many of those solutions being forthcoming at the moment. So I think it's an interesting time and potentially a dangerous time. But yeah, thanks a lot, guys. I'll see you next time.